Well, to discuss this boost to the booster rollout is Georgia Gilholy, reporter at politics.co.uk. Georgia, a very good morning to you. What do you think about this 18 million jabs? The concern for some people is that some of our other health services will have to be sacrificed somewhat to try and get this done.
Absolutely. If you're trying to offer this booster jab to millions and millions of people by the end of the year, other things are obviously going to suffer. And we have actually seen, explicitly GPs be incentivized with bonuses, basically, I think it's £20-30 to get people jabbed. And I'm assuming this is also going to be the case going forward with the booster jab for younger people. And it doesn't really make sense to me when we have a backlog of appointments of around 6 million, which is going up 100,000 a month. People needing checkups, people needing cancer screenings, that kind of stuff that already fell behind during lockdown, to focus on getting, young people my age who, let's face it, are at a very, very low risk when it comes to COVID. And also, when it comes to this new variant, to be focusing on that rather than trying to tackle the massive issues that the NHS has going into the winter already.
And of course, tomorrow, the Prime Minister faces a possible huge rebellion of his own MPs, with Labour ensuring it will go through his proposals for Plan B. But he's under pressure still, isn't he?
He's under pressure. I think it's more of an internal party matter, though, because as you're saying, Labour are going to vote for this. I don't believe any Labour MPs have explicitly said that they'll vote against it. And most of them are, of course, going to be whipped to vote for it. And most of them will be in favour of it anyway. And we're having reports of about 60 Tory MPs who are going to rebel. Obviously not enough to sway it, given that Tories have an 80-seat majority and Labour will be voting for it. So it comes across as the government looking feeble, being able to, or rather not able to, control its own MPs, control its own ranks, rather than them being, not able to get the legislation through, which it will anyway. And I think that this is something that, depending on what happens, obviously, could sort of go forward into the next election, really affect the government's image. And obviously, it's not the first time in the last few days even that the government has sort of looked weak, looked feeble.
I mean, we're talking about the government's image. There's this now awkward set of answers that will be demanded of Boris Johnson at this Christmas quiz, sitting beside two colleagues. How do you think this part of the story is going to play out? What impacts are going to have?
Yeah, I think it depends, because sort of reviewing the responses over the last few days, I think this image in particular has divided people a lot. I think there are people who sort of think, okay, he's only sitting next to two people who he works with, so is it that big of a deal? But also, when we saw these revelations, even prior to this photo last week, the allegations of other parties at Downing Street, involving ministers, involving the Prime Minister and aides, over 50% of people told pollsters that they thought Boris Johnson should resign over it. So I think that this image certainly isn't going to make matters easier for him, whether or not you think this image is sort of the most damning thing out of all the allegations. And I think, come on, this picture, like I'm saying, it's not the most damning thing out of everything that's been said, everything that's happened in the past few days, past few weeks, but it does breach rules, whether or not you agreed with the rules in the first place or you agree with them now. I think it's a scandal, really, that the Prime Minister can obviously be seen breaking these rules that other people were expected legally to follow. Other people, have faced fines of tens of thousands of pounds for doing such things. And it just comes across as, one rule for them, one rule for us. And I think this definitely is an issue that is going to go forward into the next election.
OK, now let's talk about some awkward people, the French. The fishing dispute and the threat to blockade Calais and other ports just before Christmas. Britain has been handing out more licences than British trawlers are happy with, so that there's an attempt to compromise here. But what's going on?
Absolutely. I think, obviously, a bit of a loaded headline from The Telegraph. I think, obviously, there are two sides to this, and I think that probably those French fishermen, whatever we think of the legal situation, I don't know whether they're thinking, I just hate these British people. I want to ruin their Christmas. Probably, they just would like to continue operating those waters, continue fishing there, whether or not that's viable or not. We have seen the governments of Jersey, we've seen the British government grant scores of licences to these vessels over the past 6 months, I believe. And basically the government's dividing line is we're going to accept vessels that have the technology on them that can show that they've been operating in those waters pre-Brexit, so we can allow them to do it going forward. Some of these boats don't have that tech to be able to prove that. So the government is basically saying, well, if you don't have proof, you can't get the licenses. So if you're a French fisherman, that's not a barrel of laughs for you. So I can understand why they're protesting. However, if you're the British government or the government of Jersey, how else can you prove that? There may be no way to do so. It depends on a case-by-case basis, though the UK government, the governments of the Channel Islands have said that they'll continue to accept evidence whenever. So, hopefully more of them can get licenses, but if they can't prove it, you can understand why the government can't do it. Whether or not this blockade will cause that amount of chaos, I mean, we have seen protests of this kind before in the past few weeks, but it was on a very temporary basis. I think it was a few hours in a morning a few Fridays ago. But if it was sort of extended very, very close to Christmas, it could, definitely cause more hassle than the previous protests have.
Yeah, very Merry Christmas. Always good to see you, Georgia. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Good to see you.